Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight's my colleague, Clayton Jones.
Good evening again.
Good evening. Well, there's been quite a bit happening in the news this week. I think probably a good place to start would be Iowa.
Yes. We all can be glad that there are some sensible people in Iowa. The Department of Pharmacy?
The State Board of Pharmacy.
Just recommended that they change marijuana from their Schedule 1 to their Schedule 2, which will make it available to people.
Now, there's a long backstory to that. One of the longtime drug reformers in this country, Carl Olson, originally brought suit against the Iowa Board of Pharmacy, complaining that their refusal to reclassify marijuana was irrational and against the law. The Supreme Court of Iowa, in Carl's suit, required the State Board of Pharmacy to conduct hearings and meetings to determine whether, based on scientific evidence, marijuana was Schedule 1, which, like the federal law, means that it has no medical use. For about a year now, the State Board has conducted a series of public hearings. The evidence they adduced was overwhelmingly in favor of the medical effectiveness. The State Board finally, yesterday, released its report saying that they found there was definite medical use for marijuana, and they have recommended to the state legislature that they change the law to move marijuana to Schedule 2, where it can be not prescribed, because that's a federal legal term, but recommended to patients by doctors and be made available to the patients who have doctors' recommendations. So, assuming that the Iowa legislature accepts the recommendations of the State Board of Pharmacy, and I don't see where they've got much choice.
They really don't.
That's another state that's going to move to the column.
But, you know, it's generally the American public that's really pushing this, because it's not only the weird West Coast, it's happening a lot on the East Coast and along our northern border. It's happening all over.
Yeah. And right now, most of the action seems to be in the middle of the country.
Yes. You've got Wisconsin that's got the bill.
Illinois is close to passage.
Yeah. And Michigan is just, they want to go off the wall.
Well, they passed it a year ago.
Yes, but they want to go off the wall. They want to become the suppliers for the United States.
Yeah.
You
know, part of that in Michigan is the sad fate of General Motors. Michigan for years now has gone from being the steel belt to being the rust belt.
Right.
It's got one of the highest rates of unemployment in the country. Detroit is close to being a ghost town. And frankly, the Michiganders, I think, can see growing marijuana as at least a partial way out of their economic problems.
Well, if we can get the commerce laws changed in this country, that could be very well happen.
Yeah.
Because they have the space. There's so many empty buildings up there.
Yeah.
The states and the government, the towns are giving these places away.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, to do any good, the federal law has to be changed, because to be a supplier to the nation, they have to be able to move the product in interstate commerce. So that's one place where merely changing the state law doesn't provide an adequate remedy.
Well, now, like New Zealand, aren't they the other authorized place to raise poppy for opiates?
I don't know whether New Zealand has legal opium poppy growing. Australia does.
I thought New Zealand did also.
It may be, I'm not sure, but I know that Australia, India, Spain, France, and a couple of the Eastern European republics all grow legal poppies, and have been. Now, I have heard reports that Canada is about to authorize the growing of a new strain of poppies that's been crossbred so that it produces very, very, very little morphine and codeine, but a lot of the third alkali, thebaine, which is the one that's used to make hydrocodone and oxycodone, or Oxycontin, Percocet, Vicodin. And it's a little harder to refine, but your body doesn't know the difference. So if Canada starts growing low morphine level poppies as well, they'll join that crowd.
You know, there seems to be so much of this drug use, like Oxycontin, illegal use. Just like, what was his name down in Florida, the loudmouth Republican?
Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
There seems to be such a large abuse of these drugs. How come the drug manufacturers aren't made to tighten up their distribution?
Well, how can you tighten it up?
I don't know. It
words,
seems to me that a truckload of Oxycontin is pretty damn easy to follow.
Well, it's
and the factory would have to be paid for it before it goes out the factory.
but that's not where the diversion takes place. If you go to the doctor with a severe pain of some kind, or if you go to the dentist to have some tooth work done, they'll probably give you a prescription for, say, 2 dozen Vicodin. You might not need but 3 or 4 of those pills to take care of you right then. And the question is, what happens to the other 20?
Yeah.
So it's normally, that's where most of the leakage in the distribution chain takes place. It's not between the manufacturer and the pharmacist. It's what happens after the prescription is written.
Then how could Rush Limbaugh end up with thousands of these pills?
Okay, let's take a phone call and then come back. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes. Yes.
What's the most strongest drug?
What's the what?
The strongest drug.
For what?
Okay, I think I can see where you... Okay. Now, surprisingly enough, your body cannot tell the difference between heroin and Vicodin once you've taken them. They act on your body precisely the same way. When we're looking at the opioids, the drugs related to opium poppies, the artificial drug fentanyl is probably the strongest. It's about 1,000 times stronger than heroin. Heroin and morphine and pure oxycodone or hydrocodone are about the same strengths. Now, but part of it's like alcohol. If you go to the store to buy alcohol, you can buy beer that's 5 or 6% alcohol. You can buy wine that is 10 to 12 to even 20% alcohol. Most distilled liquor is about 40% alcohol, but you can get Everclear or strong rums that are 75% alcohol. And it doesn't really matter because drinkers learn how to handle them and how to tell the difference. It's the same way with drugs. We've been hearing all sorts of hysteria from the government about it ain't your granddaddy's pot, that marijuana's much stronger now than it ever was.
No stronger.
First, that's an outright lie. As far back as decent testing goes, most marijuana available has been around 5 or 6% THC. There are a few strains that are around 12% now, but buyers tend not to like them very much. But basically, most marijuana is about as strong now as it was in about 1970. If we look at the difference between, say, cocaine and amphetamine and Ritalin, the difference here is mainly in the length of their effect, not in the strength. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
My name is Brandon Chapin. I was just calling. I had a lot of problems when I was younger with depression and things like that. And the only thing that ever worked for me was marijuana. You know, I had tried all the legal drugs.
Okay.
Psychiatrists had given me the legal drugs, everything. And marijuana was the only thing that helped me. And God bless marijuana.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't seen many studies about the effect of marijuana on depression. Interestingly enough, Newsweek a week or two ago had 2 cover stories. One on do antidepressants help at all? The other one saying, yes, they do help. One of the real problems, we're just now finding out that the word depression may cover up to a dozen different kinds of mental illnesses, and what works for one is probably not going to work for another. Now, whether marijuana works for depression, I don't know, and I'll admit I haven't seen any studies on it. Now, I myself spent years and years taking all sorts of different kinds of antidepressants, so I feel like they worked. I haven't had any for years, but once again, what I think worked for me doesn't really tell us much about whether they're any good or not.
I've never used them. The only thing I've ever used is good cannabis.
Yeah. So, I don't know. You say it helped with you. If it works, that's fine. I'm not sure I give you any recommendation. Back, Clayton, to your question about the Limburger and how
Russ
he got...
Limburg. When he got arrested, or shortly after, there was he was getting those Oxycontins by the thousands. He was getting bags of them.
He did 2 things, and one, he was doing something that's fairly common. He was what's called doctor shopping.
Yes.
Where he might get appointments with a dozen different doctors, tell each of them the same story, and get prescriptions from each of them. But he was doing something else which I think was totally unconscionable, and frankly for which I think he should have been sent to jail. He had a full-time non-citizen housekeeper, and he threatened her and made her go out and buy Oxycontin on the black market for him, so that she was running the risk of going to jail, so rushed to get his pills. We have another phone call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, my name is Rusty Shackelford.
Yes, sir.
But that's an alias.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, I want to say that I have really bad anxiety issues,
Yes.
and the green stuff is the only thing that helps me. Really, it does.
A lot of
Okay.
people say that.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it helps them with bipolar, depression. A lot of people say a lot of things about it,
Yeah.
and it's not the answer for everyone.
And as I say once again, if the last 100 years of pharmacology teaches anything, it's that finding out whether or not any drug works or not is much harder than it looks. And typically speaking, anything less than a double-blind, large statistical study is probably unreliable. And that's a good point to take a break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
about 60+% of the marijuana use in this country is clearly in Anglo communities, in white communities. But if you look at the rate of arrest, you end up realizing that 10% of the people end up accounting for 35% of the rest. If you look at the prosecution, then we end up representing about 47% of those who get prosecuted. If you look at convictions, we end up being close to 60% of those who get convicted. If you look at those who end up being incarcerated, you end up being about 72%. So you go from being 10% of the population to being 72% of the people who are being incarcerated. I call it that there is a criminal industrial complex that has learned how to mine black gold.
The jury right to say not guilty is an essential safeguard against injustice, which dates back to English common law and the founding of the United States. Jurors in early 19th century America routinely refused to enforce the Alien and Sedition Act, and they rejected the Fugitive Slave Act. Jurors in early 20th century America refused to enforce alcohol prohibition. The injustices of the war on drugs have become obvious to many Americans. In cases where the law, prosecutorial excesses, and the likely sentence seem manifestly unfair, jury nullification ensures the citizen juror a more equal status with those who write the laws. Please visit the Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Please keep such decisions private. Nullification is your right, your responsibility, perfectly legal and just.
Hi, I'm Ethan Nadelman, the founding executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance. You're watching Drugs, Crimes, and Politics. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, we're back. That last spot talked about the effect of marijuana arrest on the black population of this country. And I think we should point out that in one way or another, counting pre-arrest detention, time in jail or prison at the current, or release on probation or parole, something like 30% of all of the black males in the United States are under the control of the criminal justice system. I might also add, if we look at California right now, they're under a federal court order to do something about their prison system because its overcrowding is such as to create unconstitutional conditions. Many states, including Texas, are putting pressure on their prison budgets because, frankly, the prisons have gotten to the point where we can't afford them anymore. And, one way to ease a lot of that pressure without decreasing public safety in any way whatsoever is to simply remove from the prisons all of those people that are there for simply possessing a personal amount of any kind of drug.
How about locally, we start putting people out on an NCB, no cash bond, so that our local jails won't get overcrowded and cost us where our sheriff wants a new jail facility again.
At least 10% of the population of the local jail is there on drug-related offenses of one kind or another. The state law that allows police to issue citations like traffic tickets, instead of making arrests for misdemeanors, including personal drug possession cases, also says that when that person shows up in court, the judge will grant a personal recognizance bond, in other words, release on a signed promise to show up for trial, unless good cause is shown. That in itself would save literally millions of dollars locally, both in police cost and jail cost. We have another phone call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, my name's Randy. Anyways, I was just, oh my gosh, I can hear myself. I'm a little nervous. But
Okay.
I was wondering, I heard something on the news that I think Connecticut decriminalized marijuana because they couldn't afford it in the
Okay.
prison system or something.
Okay. I can try to answer that. I don't think Connecticut has actually decriminalized, but they're one of several states that are now talking about it. Massachusetts is another that has a decriminalization bill in front of the legislature at this time. California and Oregon are both going a step further and are considering bills to actually legalize marijuana, not just decriminalize it.
And Connecticut has had the bill on the governor's desk twice now, and
Yeah.
it's been vetoed.
It's been vetoed by the governor 2
And
times.
if it comes up again, I do think that they will override the veto.
Well, is what's her name, Grosso, still governor there?
I believe yes.
Another caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes. My name is Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
I was listening to the show earlier, and there was a guy who was talking about anxiety and marijuana.
Yes.
And I want to say that I actually have bipolar disorder, and one of the things my doctor told me is never use marijuana at any point while you're, being medicated or being treated for bipolar disorder or anxiety, because I've been prescribed other things, but at the same time, I think it's something in our brain that just doesn't work well with it, and it kind of incites manic states. And
Have you tried cannabis with your?
Well, let's. Go ahead now.
I was going to ask him if he had tried cannabis and what kind of effects did it have on him.
He said his doctor had told him not to. And frankly, I think the best advice any of us can give you is, as long as you trust your doctor enough to be seeking treatment from him, your best bet is to follow his advice.
Amen.
I personally, and this is without much real evidence at all, I personally would be suspicious about cannabis with bipolar disorder, because I can see where the euphoric effect of cannabis could certainly tend to intensify the manic side of the swing. But that is strictly a layman's opinion, and I'm not speaking as any kind of medical authority.
Now, I've talked to people that said it kind of mellows them so that they don't go high or low.
That could be the case, but once again, I think I have to stress that if you trust your doctor enough that you're willing to continue seeking treatment from him, your best bet is to follow his advice on medications.
Exactly.
And if you do take anything other than what he's prescribed, be sure and tell him about it. Not only what it is, but in what amounts. So, for one example, a lot of people take St. John's wort. It has had a totally undeserved reputation as being a mild antidepressant. But it has horrible interactions with literally dozens of different drugs. And if you don't tell your doctor that you're taking something like that, then it could have a reaction with something he is prescribing for you.
That's right.
And you could end up in deep trouble. If you try taking cannabis and don't let your doctor know about it, once again, it could interact with something else you're taking. I don't know of any interactions, but there probably are some. And because he doesn't know what you're doing, he could very easily give you bad advice or bad treatment because he doesn't know what's going on.
Right. My doctor, every single doctor I've ever gone to knows that I use cannabis.
Yeah. And I think this is the main thing, that whatever you do, be totally honest with your doctor about it. And let me also say, with the lawyer side of me coming out, that whatever you tell your doctor in the course of your medical treatment remains totally private, and he cannot be forced. In fact, he's not even allowed to volunteer. He can't be forced to tell that to any police or investigators or judge or anyone else. He's required by law to keep your medical secrets a secret. So I don't care if you're shooting up heroin 5 times a day, if you're gobbling Ritalin by the bottle, if you're smoking marijuana around the clock, tell your doctor about it, because he needs to know to help you out. Now, we've been getting some wonderful calls tonight. Our phone number is on the screen. If you're watching this either on streaming video or on a delayed basis on YouTube, notice we also have an email address up there. You can submit a question or comment to that email address. I will answer you fairly quickly, and oftentimes we will use your comment or question on the next show. So we always love to hear from you in any medium. We try to make this as much as possible your show.
Yes, it's your show, so please call in with your questions.
Yeah. One other thing that happened this week that kind of makes me want to climb up on my soapbox and rant a little bit. And this happened in Colorado. A man who was growing and providing medical marijuana in accordance with state law appeared on a local television show showing the viewers his growing operations and talking to them on the TV show about what he was doing and why and how. A day or two later, he was arrested and charged with a federal crime of distributing marijuana by the DEA agents. Now, this is almost a year after the Attorney General said that the federal government would not be arresting people who were in compliance with state medical marijuana laws. There is an old legal doctrine, it was promulgated by the Supreme Court in about 1970, but it's older than that, that says that a police agency or anyone in the government cannot use the criminal law selectively to prosecute someone for exercising a constitutional right, especially free speech. And if the Attorney General has said, we will not arrest people who follow state medical marijuana laws, and if this person was arrested either to frighten other people from going on television or to make an example out of him for having appeared on television, then the DEA is flagrantly violating the Constitution. And the federal judge hearing this case, I think, should take appropriate actions to censure the agents that did it. It's unexcusable for the federal government under guise of fairly and uniformly enforcing the law to penalize people for exercising their constitutional rights. Now, if any of the rest of you feel this way, please let the government and the Colorado newspapers and television stations know how you feel about it.
Now, in California, they've have in the past raided the dispensaries.
Yes.
But they haven't been prosecuting people.
Well,
they arrest them, they make them go through the legal hoops, they destroy their property, take their product and take their money, and then nobody gets prosecuted.
I think, and really, you know, this is a place where it's really hard to find an effective remedy. What they were doing in those cases, they were using legitimate search warrants.
Yeah.
I mean, they had good reason to believe these people were violating the federal law. I mean, they clearly are. But they were taking these legitimate search warrants not in order to get evidence to bring a case against a wrongdoer, but as an excuse to gain access to the property where they would trash and destroy all of the office fixtures and furniture, destroy all of the products, confiscate any money they found, take the business's books so they couldn't conduct their business anymore, simply for the purpose of harassing the people because they knew they couldn't win cases in front of California juries. To me, I think if you could put the evidence together, which I doubt that you could, this would amount to an abusive process and a violation of civil rights by the DEA agents. I'm glad Holder straightened most of that out. And they're screaming at me, telling me it's time to take another break, so we'll see you back.
Time to play Name That Drug by its side effects.
Swelling of the lips, bloating, death. You'll never get this in 10 seconds. This new medicine is undergoing trials in Canada. It's made from a sea creature. It's hundreds of times more powerful than heroin. It helps those in great pain, like cancer patients. This med also helps cure heroin addiction. They said that 100 years ago when heroin displaced morphine. Time's up. The answer from the yellow pufferfish, tetrodetoxin.
This week in drug war history, February 24, 2000, members of the Belgian Parliament make a proposal to modify their laws in order to partially decriminalize the possession of cannabis and its derivatives. February 26, 1995, former mayor of San Francisco, Frank Jordan, is quoted in the Los Angeles Times, "I have no problem whatsoever with the use of marijuana for medical purposes. I am sensitive and compassionate to people who have legitimate needs." February 27, 1999, conservative William F. Buckley Jr. is quoted in the New York Post, "Even if one takes every reefer madness allegation of the prohibitionists at face value, prohibition has done far more to far more people than marijuana ever could." February 28, 2000, UPI reports that Spanish researchers said the chemical in marijuana that produces a high shows promise as a weapon against deadly brain tumors. March 1st, 1915, the Harrison Narcotics Act goes into legal effect, beginning prohibition of drugs. March 1st, 1999, the advice columnist Abigail Van Buren in her popular column Dear Abby writes, "I agree that marijuana laws are overdue for an overhaul. I also favor medical marijuana use if it is prescribed by a physician." This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
We've got our friend Dean Becker of the Drug Truth Network waiting on the phone, but before we talk to Dean, I've got some quick announcements. First, Houston Normal will meet tomorrow night, Thursday, at 7:30, the West Gray Cafe in the 400 block of West Gray, just east of Montrose. The meeting is at 7:30. A lot of people get there around 6:30 to eat and socialize. The 1st of May, roughly, is the Cannabis Caravan to Austin, I think together with festivities in one of the local parks. About the first week in May sometime is the Art Car Parade, the 8th of May, and they're saying if someone has a good-looking, good-shape, late model white van that they would volunteer for a day to be painted with water paints and cleaned up at the end of the day to be a medical marijuana ambulance in the parade. They could sure use your help. And now let's see what Dean has to say. Hello, Dean. You're on the air.
Hey, Buford. How you doing?
Just fine.
It's good to talk with you again. Yeah, it's been another crazy week in the drug war. I think we've started to bring focus to bear on this horrible situation in Mexico. More and more people are beginning to realize that that's just not working out the way it was originally planned, if you will. And this past week I had El Paso City Councilman Beto O'Rourke on my Cultural Baggage show, talking about the violence going on down there in Nuevo Laredo, in Ciudad Juarez, I'm sorry.
Was he the one that originally sponsored the resolution to debate the laws about drugs?
Yes, it was him that was kind of leading the way. That was back in January of 2009.
Yes.
And I think it was a unanimous vote other than the mayor who vetoed it.
Yes.
And kind of Congressman Reyes had called each one of their offices and told them that if they continue down this road, that it'll mean less funding for their city's endeavors.
And let's point out that that congressman is a former, is it either DEA or Border Patrol agent?
Right, and it's all these cops playing doctors on TV. That's what really keeps the drug war rolling, I think. But Beto was talking about, we all heard the story, the 15 or 16 young people aged about 17 to 23 that got gunned down. 4 or 5 SUVs pull up, the cartel members go inside the house and just begin firing indiscriminately, killing well over a dozen young people. Perhaps one of them had offended someone within the cartels. No one knows for sure as of yet. But it's just another example. I think the high death toll there in Ciudad Juarez was 69 people in one day.
Yes.
The war going on in Mexico far outpaces what's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq combined these days. Yet we seem to ignore it and continue down this pipe dream that somehow we will stop the flow of drugs and we'll stop these guys by doing that. We also had Michael Blunk. He's a Houston boy. He's one of the U of H. He's a board member of Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Yes.
And last week they had a series of rallies or vigils, if you will, at Mexican embassies and U.S. federal buildings to protest what's happening in Mexico, to try to bring more light to this situation. And as I said earlier, the people are beginning to understand there's a problem, I think, more than they ever have before, but they still don't get the direction or the understanding that they need from the major media. I would therefore recommend to people that they go check out that show with Beto O'Rourke. It is available on my website, which is drugtruth.net. There are hundreds of shows there with transcripts available for most of them, and it's come to the point where we have to do something.
Yes.
And people can know the situation, they can understand the problem, they can even know the solution. But until they share their understanding with their elected officials, until they contact their police departments and the DA's office, and they express the need to do something other than this, 90-year, 100-year drug war, it's going to continue, and it will escalate, and it will get worse.
Okay.
Kind of proud I had a post, a blog on this week in the Huffington Post. It talks about the situation in Mexico. I titled it up, Drug War Mistaken. And contained within that is a quote from one-time Nobel laureate Milton Friedman. He's now passed away, or I guess a couple of years back, but he wrote a letter to who was then the U.S. drug czar, William Bennett, and basically he said, I beseech you from the bowels of Christ, is it not possible that you are mistaken? And the mistake is in believing that all of these draconian efforts will somehow win the war, when the truth be told, all these draconian efforts just exacerbate the problem and in fact create many of the problems which are associated with drug use. Buford, as you well know, it is not drug use that is the problem. It is the drug war.
That's right. And where can people hear your broadcast, Dean?
Well, Sunday evenings now. They have me doing my shows back-to-back. This coming week, actually, I'm being bumped for a special they're running. But on a typical Sunday, 51 weeks a year, they can hear me on KPFT radio, which is 90.1 FM. If you're in Galveston, 89.5 on the FM dial. And it's at 6:30 to 7:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you, sir.
And speaking of publicity, I noticed that on the newsstand this month, High Times has a new monthly periodical out called High Times Medical Marijuana.
I haven't seen that one.
I thumbed through it, and it looks like it's very California-centered, of course.
Mm-hmm.
and an amazing number of large glossy display advertisements. The business side of it is definitely there.
Well, there's Treating Yourself, which is another magazine that's for medical marijuana patients, and Weed World. I've read both of them a couple of times.
I've thumbed through a copy of Weed World, which is British, and unfortunately, I would have to grade the content of Weed World
as low. Somewhere
as about a C- or D+ in terms of the quality of the content. It's got some fun stuff in it, but I wouldn't rely on it.
No. Treating Yourself is a really good put together magazine.
I'll have to look at that. And I understand there are now a couple of more of the free weekly kind of newspaper thing that have showed up in Denver recently as well. So, I think in a lot of ways, California and Denver are really pointing the way the country seems to be going. And we have another phone call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Sam Truth. How are you, Buford?
That's good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I promised a couple of weeks ago that I would report back about the Texas Coalition for Compassionate Care.
Yes.
And so wanted to keep my promise.
Okay, I understand you all had a meeting up in Dallas. Was it this week or last week?
Actually, it was last night.
Oh, okay, last night. How are things going?
Well, it was a great first meeting. There were a lot of people, of course, of like mind, and it's really important. Steve Betson wanted me to let everyone know that one of the most important things to do right now is to sign up for the newsletter.
Yes.
That is something that's going to be very important because it'll keep you connected with everything that's happening. It'll also help you figure out what you can do to help.
Yes.
And really, that's the most important thing. So everyone, you could go to Texas Compassion and sign up for the newsletter there.
Okay, that's a website?
That's correct. That's correct.
Do you have the full address for it so they can find it?
Sure, and that's Texas Compassion, COMPAION.org, TexasCompassion.org.
Okay. And does that have a place on it to sign up for the newsletter?
They sure do, Buford, and what's going to happen over the next few weeks here is a new newsletter will be sent out with the updates from this meeting. Essentially what is taking place is there are a couple bills that a variety of learned people around the state of Texas involved in this crusade, this fight for our families, to try to develop the appropriate language that will have a chance here in Texas. And so that's what's taking place right now. So if you want to become involved, the very first step, signing up for that newsletter, and one of the most important things everyone could do right now to help.
Okay.
I got a question for you. What does it sound like that people are leaning towards as far as wanting in our legislative bill that we're going to put forth? Are we going to do more of a affirmative defense, or are people talking more of a full medical marijuana bill like California or Colorado or elsewhere?
Well, that's a great question. Really, the feelings of all of us here in Texas run the gambit from please just give me protection from incarceration to life, liberty, and happiness. This should be 100% legal. So the reality is, though, people are suffering and people are dying. and it's continuing to happen every day. Yes.
I've been wondering, I know that this group is centered primarily in the Dallas area. Has there been any thought of possibly trying to organize chapters in Houston or Austin or San Antonio?
Oh, that's also a great question. That was actually touched on last night. Stephen Betson wanted me also to let everyone know that the only reason it was held in Dallas was because that's where he lives.
Right, yeah.
And if you've seen the news, you know that he's a caretaker. And so it was just convenient. I drove up from Houston. And there were some other people that drove from long distances. I want to be clear. Texas Compassion represents Texans.
Yes.
So absolutely, as a matter of fact, the newsletter will, in being able to create chapters, and that's exactly the type of thing we need. Thank you so much for asking that.
Okay, thank you for calling in and keeping us up to date. And, you know, we are always happy to let our viewers know what's going on. Thank you again. And I know John's frowning at me, but I think in terms of the time and the hour that we're just going to forego the last break and keep going the way we are.
That's it.
Do you want to add anything about the Texas Compassion Group, Clayton?
You know, I called Steve today, and I was talking to him about coming down here to have a meeting.
Yeah.
And we're trying to put something together on that right now.
Okay. Oh, it would strike me that there are definitely enough people in Houston that are using medical marijuana that, if nothing else, just serving as a support group for each other.
Oh, yeah.
Could be remedied by having somewhat of a more formal organization here. And, you know, Texas is an awful big place. You can drive through 3 or 4 of those dinky little eastern states between here and Dallas. So I really think that many things, you know, we can do things over the internet that no one could even dream about when I was a kid. But for a lot of purposes, being able to sit in the same room with someone and talk face to face makes a lot of difference. And I really think that particularly in something like medical patients getting together, there's a lot to be said for being able to do it in a face-to-face, almost touch the flesh kind of thing, rather than doing it all on the internet. I would also say that more and more I'm seeing our problem as being not one with the legislature itself. I mean, to be quite honest about it, the very nature of the game is that politicians are whores. If you buy them with enough votes, they'll play whatever tricks you ask for. Now, that may not sound nice, that may not sound constitutional and ethereal, but that's the way the game is played. Our problem in trying to change the laws in this state or at the national level is that we haven't gotten the word out to the general public. For some reason, we haven't been able to attract the attention of the mass media. We don't get stories in the newspaper. We don't get stories on television. I noticed that one of the local TV stations this week, on their local nightly news, was running a hysteria type story about how the new relaxed Mexican drug laws make it just so much easier for Texas teenagers to get drugs in Mexico. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Absolutely absurd.
Yeah. And how we, sometimes I think that trying to talk reasonably with a television news director or a newspaper editor is a whole lot like the man that once claimed that he could reason calmly with a mule. But when someone asked him to demonstrate, he started by picking up a 2x4 and whacking the mule in the head with it. And the guy said, "Wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to reason with the mule." And the guy said, "I am, but I have to attract his attention first."
That's a tool we should start using here with our politicians.
Well, I'm not sure that the politicians are as bright as the mule. It might work with newspaper editors. It might work with television news directors. I'm not sure anything but threats to send them home at the next election can possibly work with a politician. John still keeps insisting I take a break, so let's see what he's going to do.
Hi, I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. Welcome to Marijuana 2-Minute Truths. We've received lots of emails from viewers who want to know about the long-term health effects of marijuana, particularly what, if any, damage smoking marijuana causes to your lungs. Your lungs bring essential oxygen into your body, so of course hurting your lungs is a terrible idea. Did you know, for instance, that nearly 500,000 Americans die every year from tobacco-related lung disorders? If you've been paying attention, you probably did. But do you know how many people have ever died from marijuana-related cancer? 0. No one. Marijuana has never been shown to cause cancer in humans, and the largest, most definitive epidemiological studies have failed to find an association between marijuana use and lung cancer, or any other kind of cancer typically linked with smoking cigarettes. In 2006, Dr. Donald Tashkin of UCLA published what is perhaps the most famous of the marijuana lung cancer studies. The study of 2,200 people in Los Angeles found that even heavy marijuana smokers were no more likely to develop lung cancer than non-users, in contrast with tobacco users whose risk increases the more they smoke. Interestingly, this study was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Dr. Tashkin was later quoted in the Washington Post. "We hypothesized that there would be a positive association between marijuana use and lung cancer, and that the association would be more positive with heavier use. What we found instead was no association at all, and even a suggestion of some protective effect. In fact, some scientific studies have shown a trend toward lower lung cancer rates among marijuana smokers than non-smokers, suggesting that marijuana's active components, cannabinoids, have anti-tumor properties. Take a look at these findings. Cannabinoids are selective anti-tumor compounds, as they can kill tumor cells without affecting their non-transformed counterparts. A strong and statistically significant anti-tumor effect was observed, in particular for a highly malignant human breast carcinoma cell line. Cannabidiol and cannabidiol-rich extract counteract tumor cell growth. This should not be taken to mean marijuana is good for you. No one is saying that. But how can marijuana be illegal when it has never been proven to have killed a single person through overdose or illness in 5,000 years of recorded history, while in the next hour, approximately 50 Americans will die from a tobacco-related illness? This has been your 2-Minute Truth. Marijuana has not been shown to cause lung cancer, but cannabinoids may help fight cancer. I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. Don't forget to email us your questions. Send them to socialnetwork@mpp.org with the subject line Ask Nadia. Goodbye.
Years ago when I started studying this material, there was a story, probably apocryphal, going the rounds, that in all of the medical records they had found, there was only one person whose death could clearly be attributed to marijuana. And this was a dock worker in the port at Rotterdam who was crushed to death when a container fell on him and it had some smuggled marijuana in it. Now, that's the only medically confirmed related death that I'm aware of. So, We're about to run out of time. Any last thoughts tonight?
Yeah. It is so important for everybody to sit down right now and write that letter to your representative. It's amazing just how much it does, because every time I've gone to one of them, they keep bringing these handwritten letters up to me to show me what people think. And it sure would be nice to have a whole lot of letters that saying that marijuana is the right thing to do.
Now, let me add a couple of things to that.
Okay.
One is that if you go to the State of Texas webpage, there's a place on it where you can enter in your zip code, and it will give you the names and all of the contact information for all of your representatives, state representatives, state senator, governor, congressman, U.S. senator, president, and mayor. So use that and write them. It's only if we catch their attention that anything will happen. And I think something else. Right now we're in the middle of a hot campaign session with the primaries. We have all sorts of candidates from Governor Haircut on down that are appearing at sites all over the state. If you get a chance to go to one of these events and have a chance to ask a question, bring up something on marijuana and see how they stammer and avoid it. But at least make them do it in public.
Yes.
This campaign's as good a time as any to start putting the pressure on. And we're...
Well, I mean, it's just so imperative that it's done, and I know that you all hear us talking over and over and over again about the same thing, a handwritten letter.
And if you sent one 2 weeks ago, hey, send another one now.
Really?
I counted it up, and if you went through the entire list of elected representatives you have, from city councilman and county commissioner all the way up to Barack Obama, you could write a letter a month and not get all the way around the list in a year's time. So there's plenty out there to do. And if you're too lazy to write that handwritten letter, you can at least send them an email or make a phone call. They all have offices and office hours in their home district. Make an appointment and go by and talk to them. That might even be fun.
It is. I go several times a year.
And they still listen to you, don't they?
Yes, they do. As a matter of fact, you know, I've in the past have said that my representative, Dwayne Bohack, was a little hard to get through to. You know, after all these years I've been talking with him, he is, I really do believe, is coming around to listening to reason.
And I would hate to wish bad luck on anyone, but I've been struck by the number of politicians that have come around to seeing the wisdom on these issues when some member of their family has been struck with some disease and used medical marijuana. So keep the pressure on, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories and
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. You end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.